our weekly live podcast recording of Transformation Ground Control. Today's topic that we're going to cover is digital and technology trends to be ready for in 2024. We're going to cover the things you need to know about emerging technology and tech trends in general, especially as you prepare for a digital transformation in the coming year or more. So really look forward to the conversation here today. And bear with me, I've got to I have a echo here, and I'm not sure why, so I'm going to try and get rid of that real quick. I don't know if that's you, AV, or if that's me.
I don't think it's me.
Bear with us. There we go. That is me, actually. Okay. I am the source of the problem, and I think I fixed it. So apologies for the rough start there. It's Tuesday morning, so it's a bleed over from Monday. So
it's a trend when I'm on the show, Eric. I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to talk about tech trends, but I can't get my own technology to work. I've got
it's
LinkedIn.
Fine. It's you and me together. That doesn't work. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'll introduce our guest here in just a moment. But before I do, love to hear from the global audience here today, where you're joining from today. If you could drop in the chat what city and country you're joining from, we'd love to hear where you're joining from today. So I'm in Denver, Colorado. My guest AV is in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. But again, now that our tech is working, we're going to talk about digital and technology trends to be ready for in 2024. We're going to ask you for questions too, audience. So any questions you might have about emerging technology or trends and things to be aware of, things you've seen transpire here in 2023 and what you expect to see in 2024. Love to hear your comments and feedback along the way here. Secondly, as I mentioned, this is a live recording of our Transformation Ground Control podcast, which you can watch past episodes by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find the podcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, where it streams every Wednesday. And you can also find it on audio podcast platforms throughout the world. So be sure to check out that the podcast on those platforms. And by being part of today's live discussion, you are actually helping us create the podcast. So thank you for that. So today's topic, digital and tech trends to be ready for in 2024. Our guest today is AV from Avero, and that is not AV. That is not your real name. You'll have to pronounce your real name for us. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself while you're at it.
Hi. Hello, audience. My name is Avero Verekar. Just go by AV. I'm the founder and CEO at Avero Advisors. We do digital transformation and ERP consulting for state and local governments across the U.S. We're based here in Maryville, Tennessee, and I see that Katie Kerr, our client, is on. Hi, Katie. And excited to be here talking about trends for 2024. Gosh, already.
I know. It's already time to start thinking. We don't want to jump the gun too much, but, companies come up, organizations come up on Q4, and that's where you tend to get real serious about planning for the coming year. So we thought it'd be a great time to have the conversation. And one thing, too, I'm going to ask you about Avero Advisors in just a moment. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. But before I do, I have to maybe share with the audience, our companies have two things in common. One is that we do, we both do technology consulting. We're both independent and tech agnostic. Secondly, we both made the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies, you for the third time, us for the second time in a row. So congratulations.
Thank you. And you too.
And then third, I guess there are three things we have in common. Thirdly, we are both of our companies are sponsoring or co-sponsoring the upcoming STRATOSPHERE 2023 event, which is in Denver, Colorado. In fact, I'm going to share with you a link right here. You can see on your screen. If you go to stratosphere2023.com, you can register for the in-person event in Denver, Colorado. AV and I will both be there along with many other speakers. So be sure to check out the website. And today is actually the deadline for the early bird pricing. And you save a lot of money if you register by the end of today. And I'm not just saying that in a salesy kind of way, like, buy today and you save X amount of money. The deadline is actually August 15th to get the early bird discount. So just coincidentally here today. So be sure to check it out and hope to see many of you there in person. That's stratosphere2023.com. So we've got a lot in common. Our two companies have a lot in common. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background in Avero too, just your upbringing and that sort of thing.
Sure thing. So I grew up in India, and I moved to the States in 2022. And growing up in India, if you've got the grades, you're expected to go to med school or engineering, right? So around 15, I made the decision to tell my parents that I don't want to do that. I want to be a chef. But I was always they lost their mind at me for the very first time, I think, and that wasn't a great idea. So the compromise position was that I went to get degrees in accounting and finance, but I always had a technical bent. Like I was the kid that opened up radios to see what was inside, put them back together, and I also started a tech company in Goa, my hometown, in when I was 18, and we built websites for people that didn't have computers or didn't know what the internet was. So it was just bad timing. But fast forward to getting my second master's degree in finance, and I realized I don't want to work in accounting or finance. And I stumbled upon the world of ERP consulting and digital transformations, where I could really use both sides of my brain to sort of build a career out of helping people redesign processes and modernize using technology. So that's what my background is. And in 2016, I started Avero Advisors to focus on the local government in the US, in Maryville, Tennessee. And my idea was that, and still is, that our clients are underserved. I know yours are, especially from a consulting perspective. There's a lot of software vendors out there, and every day our clients are batting away phone calls and emails from thousands of vendors saying this is the product that's going to change your life, but they have no idea because they have day jobs. They've been, mayors, they're police officers, they are city managers that don't necessarily have the in-depth knowledge, and that's where we come in. So Avero focuses on helping those clients cut through the noise and modernize their processes.
Right. And it's interesting because you and I met, and technically we're competitors, right? Like we are competing for to do the same kind of work. But then we learned after
Yeah.
getting to know one another, like we can actually coexist and maybe
Yeah.
even get along and maybe even collaborate on some
Yeah,
stuff. So
we have been collaborating digitally and with business, so it's been great, Eric.
yeah, it has been great partnership between our
Mhm.
two firms. So I want to turn to the audience too, and thank you for everyone for dropping in the chat where you're from. We've got people from all over the world, as I mentioned, Vietnam, Denver, Colorado, city of Maryville, India, Anthem, Arizona, Dallas,
Yeah,
Texas, Raleigh, North Carolina, Saudi Arabia, Johannesburg, South Africa,
wow,
India, Turkey, India again. So thank you
yeah,
everyone for joining all over the world, especially at odd times of the day and evening for those of you there in different
yeah.
time zones than us.
And happy Independence Day in India,
Yes,
15th of August, yeah. It's a good
yeah,
day.
is it, yeah, actually, today is Independence Day in
It
India. I
is.
did not know
Yeah,
that. So
yeah, yep,
happy Independence Day to everyone that's either in India or from India. So that's a very interesting coincidence there. Well, good. And again, feel free to drop in the chat as well, whatever stream you're watching on, any questions you might have, and we'll get to those questions as well. But I'm going to start with a few basic ones just to get us started here, AV. And I guess just to start, when you look at 2023 so far, we're not through with
mhm.
2023, but we're far enough in that we kind of know how things are shaping up. What are some of the biggest trends that you saw materialize in 2023, or the ones that you're most excited about that you really saw emerge and
Yeah.
become more reality here this year?
So a few things, right? We focus on local government. So we went to the GFOA conference in May in Portland, had a good, decent presence. We had a booth. We met a lot of interesting clients and prospects, and a few things stood out. One is the reinforcement that the world needs third-party independent, truly independent consultants. A lot of CFOs came up to me and said, "Well, we've been working with so-and-so vendor that I can't name, as that claims to be third-party, but they're not. They always recommend a certain vendor. They don't really study our processes. They've given us copy-paste deliverables." So it was heartening to see that truly independent consulting firms like ours have a place and a solid opportunity here. The second thing is that, especially in my field, local governments, the the field has been dominated by one or two vendors over the last 20 years, especially in the mid-market sector. And we're seeing a lot of interest from the big boys, Oracle, Workday, NetSuite, OpenGov's coming up. A lot of new players coming into the market that's giving our clients a lot of choice, which is good. And the third thing is the emergence of artificial intelligence. Often used word that's kind of turned into a buzzword, but we're actually playing with some data sets and trying to help some clients put up uh, proofs of concept to see how it can really improve lives for the executives and people doing the work. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, those are similar trends to what we're seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the rise and the rise of the need of or need for independent tech agnostic consulting and
Mm-hmm.
advisory services. I think that is a trend that is continuing to develop. And as firms like Avero and Third Stage, as companies like ours become more prominent and more well known, and people just know that this is an option, I think there's more, obviously more demand. A lot of times organizations don't realize you have these third-party tech agnostic options out there until they meet someone like you or I and
Yeah.
learn about our companies. But a lot of people still don't know that this whole segment of the market exists.
Mm-hmm.
And then AI, that is something that's becoming more and more prevalent, especially with ChatGPT and Dolly and some of the consumer-facing usage of AI.
Yeah.
So that I think is what's bringing it into the mainstream for people in general, and that's sort of bleeding over into the enterprise space as well. But I'm curious to hear from you, on the AI front. That's one, if I had to pick one tech
Mm-hmm.
trend that seems to be accelerating the most, it seems like that's it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear from you, in a government/public sector sort of environment. That's not usually what you think of, or what I think of when I think of an early adopter of AI.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like you have some clients that are leveraging AI. Can you give some examples of how
Yeah.
some of your clients are starting to use AI in their day-to-day operations, or how they will be?
Yeah, and I'll address the surprise element, right? Governments have the unique advantage of being behind the times, and sometimes by design. They are 2 or 3 generations behind. They're still using older technologies. So when they do get leadership that's interested in modernization, they can leapfrog. They can learn from the private sector. They know what frogs have been kissed and should not go there, so they can leapfrog. So 5 years ago, it was the leap to SaaS, right? Our clients that were on AS400s, green screens, didn't have to go through on-premise ERP implementations. They didn't have to employ a bunch of programmers in their basements to build a system for them anymore. They just moved from the homegrown AS400s, green screens to the SaaS environment. I think it's a similar moment. The clients now that are, you won't believe this, but they're still on green screens. They're now moving to SaaS environments that are AI enabled. We are doing a lot of AI enabled consulting to speed things up, to button up things quicker, to study business processes and mine business processes. And I think the biggest impact is going to be on the reporting side, because we see successful implementations that go live and the system's in production and it's working, and yet it doesn't do any kind of meaningful reporting for the end user, for the executive, right? You have to old school ask somebody to build your report or create your own dashboards, and it's just a cumbersome process. I think that piece is getting short circuited. It's going to get there's going to be a shortcut between data and reporting that will not involve writing custom reports. I'm really, really excited about natural language processing, natural language reporting, where a non-techie executive can just ask questions of the system through a bot or through Alexa or Siri and get the answers they need right away. And that's something that I'm starting to see in our clientele.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And that conversational aspect of accessing information and data, it seems like that's sort of a low-hanging fruit for a lot of organizations. If they don't know where to start with AI, maybe they like the concept of AI, they've heard all about it,
Yeah.
maybe they've tested it with ChatGPT and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But the question becomes, well, how do you apply that to the enterprise? And those seem to be some of the low-hanging fruits. I'd be curious to hear from the audience too, where you're seeing AI being used, or are you seeing AI being used with your organizations or companies you work with? Love to hear from the audience where you're seeing AI or maybe any other emerging tech being used in different creative ways. So what do you, where do you see AI going? I know, before this discussion, before we went live, you were talking about how you're kind of knee deep in some AI aspects of your client work right now. Where do you think AI is going to head in the coming, in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, I think so. The fallacy in of AI is that it's only GPT or it's only conversational. A lot of this has been in the works for decades, right? You have pioneering companies like Microsoft, especially, that they have spent a lot of money and time on it, and then they opened up ChatGPT to us 6 months ago, and that's what they want us to see. So there's a lot going on in the background that's coming up that honestly even you and I are not so aware of, but we'll find ways to make it useful. That's our job. So where I see it going is in customer service. We're going to see a huge improvement. again, back to my clients, right? A lot of them are public housing agencies that rely a lot on paperwork, that rely on case management, they rely on social workers to get their work through. And these people are constantly at a window talking to people, interacting with them. And given the labor market we're all in, they're facing turnover as much as we are. So a caseworker of 20 years just left to go work at a software company. A caseworker that worked there for 15 years just retired. So you're losing knowledge and the ability to deal with people that are seeking support in bad times. So we're going to see a lot of those conversations turned into AI conversations with the ability to dig through decades worth of data immediately instead of having to have people come back and then deal with their application. So speed of delivery will be enhanced in the next couple of years. In the next 6 months, if we do this right, as consultants, as clients, we're going to see natural language reporting right away. Right? Microsoft's going to release Copilot here pretty soon. I don't know if you've seen it on LinkedIn, but they have a little design button now that for non-creatives like me, it's a godsend, right? You just click a button and it creates a graphic for you. So in small ways and large, AI is going to take over. It already is taking over our work environments. And I don't say that in a negative way. It's never going to me, it's not going to replace a human worker because you still need somebody to set strategic direction, to interpret data, to deal with people more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's interesting how AI could really be used as a way to replace that dependency on tribal knowledge, because you've got those people like the caseworkers you're describing or the examples
Yeah.
you describe, people that have been around for 15, 20, 30 years, and replacing that knowledge is very difficult. And while you don't want to assume that it's okay to have attrition and it's okay to lose people, you always want to do what you can to build a culture where people stay and want to be there, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
of course. But knowing that you have technology that can hedge against that risk of losing some of that tribal knowledge is a pretty big deal. It could be a game changer for a lot of organizations.
Yep, truly.
So here's a question from Kyler on LinkedIn, and this is a good question. She asked it in the context of the public sector, but maybe we could cover both angles, public and private sector. But what is the state of best of breed tech in the public sector? Will we see focus areas in government tech, or kind of what is the state of best of breed in general from what you're seeing with your clients?
So I think transparency is a big deal with our clientele. We've seen a lot of open data portals that have been deployed in the public sector, yet they still rely on older technology. So that's a cool thing. You may have a broken green screen AS400 in the back, but companies like OpenAI and OpenGov, not OpenAI, OpenGov will help you plug into those data sets and provide meaningful reporting on historical data. Now, there's a lot of implementation effort that goes in there. So I don't know what they're doing on the AI front to automate and make it speedier. And then the other thing we're seeing is customer service, like I mentioned earlier. And in terms of public safety, we're seeing a lot of modernization and upgraded environments in terms of automation, transparency. Again, we're working with large cities, police department to overhaul all of their systems, and they're still doing work on carbon paper. But the same leapfrog effect can be found there, right? They're going to go with an AI-based SaaS cloud-hosted records management system that talks to other systems. It might seem like, yeah, this was 20 years ago for those in the private sector, but my clients are still dealing with these things.
Right. Yeah. It's very, very interesting. And I think the good news for enterprise buyers and organizations that are thinking about new technologies is you have so many options now. You have these best of breed options that address specific functional needs or specific industry needs, but you also have sort of the single integrated enterprise-wide ERP systems as well. And then you also have platforms as well. These platforms like, Salesforce's Force and other
HubSpot, all of these things.
HubSpot and Palantir and Snowflake are sort of the interoperability / business intelligence / analytics sort of model. So you've got all these different niche categories that you can be pursuing. And it's interesting because it's sort of like it creates a tension, I think a healthy tension in the marketplace where you always have, these pros and cons and trade-offs and these upstarts that are trying to address deficiencies in the market. And it just gives you a lot of options, but it can also be overwhelming for organizations that don't know where to start. So be curious to see where that goes in the future.
Well, and there's also the not the fight, but the tension between different functional areas, which is why I go back to us not being necessarily technology consultants. Yes, we are, but how many times have we done therapy and change management more than the technology? So that doesn't go away no matter what AI you use or how advanced your systems are. So that leads me to, we had a conversation yesterday with a new client that talked about, well, we're in this for a organization-wide ERP system, and we have this one pocket in our organization that wants to buy a standalone best-of-breed solution. How do you deal with this? And our response to that was really, you don't deal with it. You let the chips fall based on your requirements and what your integration points are. And who knows, there might be a best-of-breed solution. So I think the understanding that one specific system can't do it all for you is also blossoming. But at the same time, it can be a fallacy because you really need to look at your operations and your requirements before you make those decisions. You can't go at it from just the software perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, as much as technology is changing, it seems like the non-technological components of transformation are not changing in some ways for both better and for worse. It seems like, on one hand, organizations are not paying enough attention to some of the non-technical aspects, especially as technology becomes more advanced. It becomes easier just to focus on the technology and not to worry or to neglect some of the other pieces. But on the flip side, we need to change the way we think about transformations. And yes, we need to be aware of technology. And to your point, we need to be technologists and understand what these technologies can do. But what's even more important is understanding the business and how we can merge the two and integrate the people, the process, and the technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great points there. Here's a question from Dennis, who is also from India, and I hope you're enjoying your Independence Day in India, Dennis. But Dennis on LinkedIn asks about adversarial attacks. How would or could artificial intelligence manage that? Are you seeing anything on that front yet in terms of cybersecurity and using AI to help mitigate some of that risk?
Yeah, I think AI has been around in that sense for a few years now. Using things like SIMs, you can predict or at least be notified of oncoming attacks before they actually happen. So a lot of that is going on. What you might see as advancements is how to respond to it, right? Again, going back to the labor shortage or who knows where people are flocking to work. But in the tech sector, you have a dearth of high-skilled labor that can respond to those attacks. And I'm not talking about cybersecurity agencies or companies. Think about your agency that just got notified that they're under ransomware attack, and you have a rookie under 1 year help desk person that's now at 3 a.m. manning the desk, responsible to respond to this and cannot get in touch with anybody. How do you respond to that? So AI will help in, again, knowledge retention, and using chatbots, they can quickly get to policies and procedures, protocols on how to respond to something. And all of that can be built in on the back end. So I saw a demo the other day that was reading data from CrowdStrike into a state's help desk system. And if you and I were to be plopped in there at 3 a.m, Eric, we could quickly search for the state's specific protocols, policies, and things to do when a certain kind of attack happens or incident happens. And I think that's going to be pivotal because you can now sit anyone there that's not necessarily a super technical person to at least respond at level 1.
Yeah. That's back in sort of back to your customer service point too. It's that same sort of functionality or ability to create that human-like interaction that could help on the IT support and the cybersecurity side of things as well. What about here's another question from Kyler. This is a really interesting one. Kyler is interested in AV's thoughts on emerging markets globally. How can government support infrastructure development to promote technology implementations? So maybe if we sort of broaden that and just look at government involvement in AI or the way technology is implemented, can or should the government be involved? Not to get too political, and I know every government throughout the world is going to have a different philosophy on this,
Yeah.
but I'm just curious in general, do you think government will need to play a role in helping these sorts of technology deployments be more successful and or hedging the risk of the displacement of AI on the labor force and that sort of thing? Or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, you can't answer that without getting a little political. But the internet and everything we do now, that's our livelihood, was started by the government in some form or another, right? The DARPA projects and the web projects. Yes, the research and private institutions had a lot to do with it, but again, the funding came from the government to kickstart these things. I think we're at a similar point in the deployment of broadband. A lot has been talked about the access, the inequality, and I know that through the infrastructure bill, there's a lot of money being spent on fiber optic deployments. And I've been in many meetings talking about these deployments, and there seems to be no cohesive plan on how to use those funds. In the end, if they're going to end up in the pockets of the large 800-pound gorillas in the connectivity market, then it's not going to do any good. So government has a big role to play today in digital equity. But my personal philosophy is that they need to be in the business of building infrastructure and not necessarily in the business of delivering broadband themselves. So that's one. And then on the AI side, all the horror stories you hear about how AI is going to kill us all and start nuclear war. Someone's got their finger on the button right now, right? It's not AI, it's a human. So right. there are guardrails we've put in place in the last 50 years for nuclear non-proliferation. I think the similar levels of care need to be taken with AI. And I've heard a lot of leading thoughts on how there needs to be a UN type organization that does nothing else but protect AI and the boundaries it sets. But who knows? I really don't know.
Yeah, and it's not dissimilar to what Elon Musk has said, for example. I mean, he's made comments about how he thinks that the development and the evolution of AI needs to slow down, and that the government, I don't know if he specifically said he thinks government should play that role, but he's sort of suggesting that someone, and I presume it would be the government, would need to step in and put those guardrails in place and make sure that we have a plan for what happens when X% of the labor force potentially gets displaced in a society because of AI.
Yeah.
What are we going to do, as a society to protect those people and to, help with that adjustment? I think that's the part we don't know, and that we're still trying to feel out.
Yeah.
Let's see here. And another similarity, Kyler points out on LinkedIn that we both have birthdays that are close together. We're both August birthdays, I believe it is. Both Leos. Although you're quite a bit younger than me.
I was going to say one of us is much older, but you gave yourself up.
But like someone said to me, like a fine whiskey or a fine wine, it gets better with time. That's what I'm telling myself now that I'm 50. Yeah. And you are not 50, so I won't reveal your age, but it's
quite a way to go.
Yeah, you got plenty of time to enjoy your youth. Well, good. How about so beyond those? So you talked about three trends you saw emerging and sort of developing in 2023. If you try to predict the future and use your crystal ball to think about 24 and beyond, not just with AI, but just tech in general, what do you think is going to change? What do you think is going to evolve? What's going to surprise us? Where do you see us headed here?
So I think the good news for us is the proliferation of the understanding that third-party independent consultants have a big role to play in this. A lot of our prospects, like I said, they don't know where to begin. They have the right visions. They have the right ideas. They want to get away from whoever vendor it is that's creating a bad environment for them. They want to modernize. They want to embrace all of these technologies. They don't know where to begin. And having a day job for a CFO of let's just say a school system or a county government or a transit agency, it's a full-time job. You're looking after billions of dollars in taxpayer funding, you don't necessarily have the time to just sit back and think about how you want to modernize your organization. So that understanding of our profession and how important it is, not just for visioning and strategizing, but also to handhold them through the process of selecting the right components of technology, how to use AI, how to deploy it safely, how to keep their data secure. All of that needs to be really well thought out. I think that trend is accelerating, and more people are understanding that thinking about digital modernization is like thinking about building a new school building or a police station. You can't just do it yourself.
Right.
You have to have architects and contract managers and construction workers that actually get the work done and done right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very true. And you talked a little bit too about the labor market and skills shortages, labor shortages. It's interesting and surprising to me how the labor market has not really recovered fully from COVID. And I think it's
Hmm.
permanently changed. I mean, I think there's
Yeah.
something that has just shifted in the labor market as far as people's willingness to work. And a lot of people didn't return back to work. A lot of people left the workforce to become parents full time
Hmm.
and or went back to school. And it just seemed like that COVID really disrupted the labor market in a way that we're still feeling the ripple effects. Similar to supply chains too. Supply chains are still sort of a mess in many ways. 3.5 years later, after the lockdown started. But I think those are sort of two realities too that we've got to continue to navigate. Is to your point, if we're going through a transformation, chances are pretty high that we don't have a lot of resources internal, and we probably have a lot less internal staff than we used to. And
Hmm.
even if we do, and of those resources we do have, a lot of them are working hybrid or remote. And how
Yeah.
do you manage them and get them involved in a project when you're not in the same place? I mean, those are things that we all just have to continue to get used to and
Yeah.
adapt to, it seems like.
Yeah. And the other thing too, Eric, is being on site is valuable, right?
Yeah.
Um, People have Zoom fatigue,
Yeah.
and um, we like being on site. I know you do too.
Yeah.
As far as
Absolutely.
practical, we want to be on site and look into the client's eyes and feel their pain and live and breathe the environment and the business practices and processes. And that just delivers better value. I think Zoom fatigue will be real. It's real now. It's people are over it. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more business travel and on-site presence next year. And of course, we'll have to, on our end, be diligent about building those costs into the pricing. But overall, I think it delivers better product and services, and I'm seeing that come back in force.
Yeah. Yeah. Likewise. And
Hmm.
I think especially when you look at some of our clients in for example, the manufacturing or the distribution space where you have shop floor workers, warehouse clerks, people that don't have the option to work from home. And we're all sitting here in
Hmm.
our offices talking about how we could be working at home and
Yeah.
should we be working at home? And then, 95% or whatever the world doesn't have that luxury or
Yeah.
that option. And
Right.
so to be able to empathize and be able to relate to these people that don't have that option, I mean, you sort of have to get out in front of them and understand what they do out on the shop floor and how their processes work. And to your point, you live and breathe their culture and their processes and their operations and their life, their day-to-day lives. I think that's all stuff that we tend to, I think we forgot a little bit about that human piece of it during COVID and got caught up amongst ourselves of whether or not we should be working from home or remotely, while at the same time realizing the world continued, most of the world continued to work in person, even during the peaks of COVID,
Yeah.
because they had no choice. And so I think we've got to recognize that and kind of adapt to that going forward.
Hmm.
Um, here's just an interesting comment from YouTube. This is from Zlatan on YouTube.
Isn't that
Great
a
stream.
famous soccer player? What are you doing in the ERP world?
Is it? Is it? So
I
you know
think so.
more about
Yeah.
soccer than I do.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe.
But he says, "Great stream, Eric. I'm a recent graduate who chose not to pursue finance, which was his degree, much like UAV, and decided to enter into the ERP world, where I'm now working for a Microsoft partner in a Business Central implementation company. So, congratulations
Yeah.
on
Good
the
move.
career pivot. Sounds similar to your
Yeah.
journey, AV, going from
Hmm.
finance to the technology side of things."
Yeah, the world needs people like us that understand finance and accounting and the back end of what you're trying to do with software, because you can't just rely on developers and engineers when it comes to that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's very Very true.
Football. Yes.
Football. Yes, we erroneously referred to it as soccer, and Kyler corrected us. It should be football. So thank you for that correction. That's the American in us both, I suppose, that are drawing that out. So let's talk a little bit about tech trends. I think a lot of the tech trends you've talked about are universal across public sector and private sector. Is there anything that you think is affecting government in the public sector differently than the private sector? You talked about the leapfrogging dynamic, which is super interesting, that in the public sector, there's maybe a little bit more of an opportunity and a luxury to be able to leapfrog, where they are today and where they're going to be in the future. That might be a little bit different with government, to where they're taking some bigger, not risks, but they're taking bigger gambles, or they're investing more heavily in technology in some ways. What are some other things that you see that potential differences between private and public sector in terms of trends and where they're headed?
Well, in general, the public sector tends to follow the private sector. So if things have worked for the private sector well, it's going to get adopted. But things like, again, it's slower adoption rates, but they're getting there. Things like using GIS as a central technology for running everything in a city is starting to become more prevalent. GIS for everything, customer service to paying your tax bills to your water bills, all of that's becoming front and center. And again, it might seem like, well, it should have happened already. Well, it hasn't. And slowly it's proliferating. And then back to my point on customer service, I think it's prevalent everywhere, right? We're working with a city here in the South that really struggling with permit applications. They have a system, everything's online, but it's been designed by engineers and IT folks, well-meaning. But if I go on to apply for a permit, it'll take me an hour just to create the accounts they want me to create. So it's not very intuitive. So there are players out there that are finding these opportunities to become the middleman, right? So an ERP system will take 2 or 3 years to implement in a worst case. And the mayor's up for election this year and really wants to fix their whatever process, permit improvements, customer service, anything that lets people do business with the city or the county from home or elsewhere without having to come into City Hall. So there are vendors and software that kind of become this mid-layer. They'll take your existing processes, plug it into your existing older systems while you're looking for newer systems, and create a modern-looking facade for data intake and interaction with the data. This isn't a new concept. I mean, we've had front-end forms for many years, for decades.
Right.
But the workflow capabilities of these tools are pretty fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's how companies and vendors like Palantir and Snowflake have really, they've really tapped into that need in the market, which is, okay, maybe you're not going to replace your back end ERP systems overnight, and most organizations are not going to. So what are your options? And they provide a good option and alternative for companies that either are going to take some time to replace their systems, or, maybe they're going to preserve a certain amount of their legacy systems, and they just want that sort of single source of truth and data source, to have that visibility into multiple systems. Here's a question that I think is a super interesting one, especially it's sort of jumping back a little bit to AI, or it is jumping back to the AI thread, but I want to come back to this because I think it's really important. This is from Bill on YouTube. Bill says, what are your thoughts on AI in the healthcare market? How far do you think AI will affect patient customer experience in 2024? And I know you guys don't work a lot directly with healthcare, but I think you touch it a little bit, just given your public sector work. Do you have any thoughts on that? It seems like that might be another industry outside the public sector that is really ripe for AI and some of the advancements that could happen in AI with all the, data and paperwork intensive aspects and the regulatory intensive aspects of healthcare. What are your thoughts there?
I think so. We don't work with healthcare directly, but we do a lot of work with health and human services, kind of related, right? How do you get welfare? How do you get healthcare benefits like Medicaid, Medicare quickly to people that deserve it? Is what we've helped some states with. So in that use case, the casework and the customer service aspect is very critical, because you spend a lot of time intaking forms, doing interviews, giving people information, looking at past data. And in cases like not necessarily healthcare related, but public housing, you have a wait list of people waiting to get housed. And on the other hand, you have empty houses that these agencies sit on because they can't quickly process people. So in healthcare, I can see applications in uh, diagnostics, right? Based on my personal history, health history, plug in it through some kind of AI engine, and the doctor can look at everything and without making uh, guesstimates or guesses. And I'm not saying doctors do that. Some do. I've had, spent some time in the hospital in the last couple of years, but it didn't seem very data driven. It's training based and it's heuristics. I think a lot of that's going to get taken away with AI um, on the serving the patient side, and on the reporting side. Of course, you're not looking at 15 different reports to find the one thing your insurance company asked for. On a patient side, I think that's what I'm most interested and excited about. On the healthcare side, is just access to my own data.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you think about, just how intense some of those processes are, and think about every time you go to the doctor and all the paperwork you've got to fill out again, even though you were just there
Yeah.
a year ago or whatever, and you've still got to fill out all this new paperwork, and just all the data that gets captured along the way. And I think AI, there's probably some great opportunities to not only streamline the process, but also potentially improve some of the outcomes of the diagnosis and the analysis and the human flaws that even doctors and professionals might have as far as
Mhm.
misdiagnosing something, or being able to use data to look for patterns and trends to help solve
Right.
medical and health problems. I think there's a big opportunity there, both short term and long term, for healthcare as well.
Yeah. And I think in ingesting data like DNA websites, right? We've all given, most of us have, to ancestry.com. Now you can buy additional services from them that tell you what risk you might be at based on your DNA and genetical history. So combining that with actual historical medical data would should produce some exciting, interesting results.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, So, given some of these emerging trends with AI and some of the other things we're talking about, some of the interoperability technologies, we talked about best of breed versus single ERP systems. Technology is changing fast, and I think it's fair to say it's accelerating, right?
Hmm.
The rate of change with technology is not slowing down. If anything, it's speeding up. What do we need to do differently as organizations, and implementation teams? How do we navigate that pace of change without losing sight of the non-technological stuff that you started to talk about earlier? What do we need
Hmm.
to do different? I mean, if we were going to change something going forward in 24 and beyond, what do we do different to navigate all this?
I think it comes down to what outcomes you're looking for, and this is what we profess all day. Tell us about the outcomes you want. Forget about what systems you're looking at. And then, based on a desired outcome, you need to back yourself into your technical functional requirements that then might match up with a specific system. Um, and then treating people like people. Again, this is a tech blog podcast, but you and I can agree that it comes down, success and failure in a tech project, especially an ERP project, comes down to how well the people were managed, how
Mhm.
well their excitement, their enthusiasm throughout the project, how well conflicts were managed, how well risk was managed. It all comes down to that. And if the product works at a basic level, it's going to work. So, not losing sight of the people aspect is very important. It's one of our core values as a company. And I think that should remain a trend forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is one of those things that, as technology continues to change, it's one of those things that it should stay the same. Is you still need to
Mhm.
focus on people, maybe even more so than you have in the past, because the impact is greater and the potential
Yeah,
business value is greater than it's
for
ever
sure.
been.
Yeah.
Right. And then Kyler is here in the background, keeping us on track here, making sure we cover an important agenda item here, which is her question is, before you guys wrap up, and those that don't know, by the way, Kyler is part of the Third Stage team. She's my podcast co-host. But she says, before you guys wrap up, can we get a sneak peek into your collaborative session at Digital Stratosphere? So you and I are doing this. We've talked about it. We're still working on the details.
Yeah.
But maybe we can sort of give a sneak peek of what we're thinking as far as what this session that you and I are going to do together
Yeah.
as Stratosphere.
So we've talked about similarities, right? Birthdays and things we like and the businesses we are in. There's a few things we disagree on, and we haven't really got into it on air. And I think that's what we're going to do at Stratosphere. I want to take you on in a debate on the things. There's not many, maybe 5 things that you and I have different views on when it comes to our businesses. So we're going to be debating.
Yes, it's going to be AV versus EK. You know, it's kind of like an epic clash of the titans.
Yeah.
You know, let's battle it out on stage in front of everyone, and maybe let people pick a winner. I don't know. We haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, we take bets, but it's not physical combat. Just making sure, right?
Well, we don't know. We can't say for sure that it might turn physical. I mean, we might get super irritated with each other.
I know. Throw things at you.
But I think it's, one thing we've talked about too is even on things we agree on, I think you and I are similar in that we see the gray areas on a continuum of options. Mm-hmm. And so I think sort of predefining a stance that we're going to take, like, for example, we were talking about best of breed versus single ERP. What you and I will pick a side, right? And we'll argue that side because you can make a pretty strong argument on both sides.
Yeah.
And so we'll have a moderator that'll say, okay, AV, what do you think? And you're going to say, single ERP is the way to go. And I'm going to say, nope, it's best of breed. And here's why. And we're going to have a little debate back and forth on topics like that. So that's sort of what we're envisioning. It might end in physical mortal combat of some sort. We're not sure. Well, you'll have to attend to find out for sure. So that's another reason to come to Stratosphere to hear different perspectives and all the nuances of decisions like that need to be made. So I guess just looking forward then, what else should organizations be thinking about? If I'm on a project team or I'm part of an organization that's getting ready for a transformation in 2024, maybe we're doing some initial planning now, or mobilizing resources, we're creating a strategy, maybe we're evaluating technology options. What are some of the other things that we should be thinking about as organizations and project teams as we enter Q4 and 2024?
So in my world, I like asking 2 questions. One is, why this, why now? Right? Why are you doing this? And what's going on? Who's pressuring you? Is there the council? Is there someone else? Why are you doing this now? You've been through life with crappy systems and bad processes for 20 plus years. And you were in charge, Mr. Mayor or city manager or CEO. Why are you doing this now? The second question I like asking is, who's in charge? We won a new contract, and it seemed like it was in my world, everything happens with committee, right? You have 20 people voting on your fate on whether or not you get the contract. So when we do, I like asking the question of who's in charge, because in a large scale implementation, there's going to be fights. There are going to be decision points. There are going to be points where you have to put your foot down. And there are decisions that us as consultants can't make for the organization. So it's really important that people have a sense of why they're doing this, why they're doing it now, what the outcome should be, and on a day-to-day basis, who's in charge on their side. Because, as consultants, we can make decisions at the project level. But if it's something that impacts the organization, the board, there has to be somebody there that makes the decision. And I think on the private side, you have the CEO, obviously. We have to tell our clients to put someone in charge, because it depends. Sorry, Kyler. Yes, get me that mug. But it depends on what the organization is made up of and how they're set up. And it's not always clear who the, grand master decision maker is.
Yeah. And it's, and Kyler did suggest in hashtag it depends mug. We might start selling it on these podcasts.
Yeah, let's do
for
it.
a limited time for $9.99. Buy this mug. But you're right. I mean, as technology changes and as the opportunities to deploy new and different and leapfrog sorts of technologies within an organization continue to advance and accelerate, it becomes even more important that we are aligned as an organization and that we have a clear strategy and plan to sort of cut through all the noise that comes along with new technology and bells and whistles, and just having a deliberate strategy and a deliberate pace at which you're going to go through the transformation, because it can be easy, to your point earlier about leapfrogging technologies. It can be easy just to bite off more than you can chew and just go after AI and predictive analytics and a new ERP system and all this new stuff you could do that you may want to need to do longer term, but it's not going to happen overnight. So how do you pace yourself to make sure you're getting the most value and you're not disrupting the business more than you need to? I think that becomes even more important as time goes on here.
And that's where we come in, right? The first thing you do, and I think you guys call it phase 0, is just sit down and plan this. Whiteboard it, make Gantt charts, make plans before you launch anything. So you need to think this through before you start biting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very true. Well, good. Well, this is great stuff. And I'm going to share it one more time here. I'm going to pop up on the screen the STRATOSPHERE link. If you go to stratosphere2023.com, you can see the speakers we have lined up so far, although that speaker list is continuing to grow day to day. In fact, we just added a couple more this week already. But AV and I will be two of the keynotes there. Both of our companies are sponsoring the event. It'll be October 4th through the 6th in Denver, stratosphere2023.com. Today is the last day of early bird pricing, and you save hundreds of dollars, US dollars, if you register now. So be sure to check that out. And the other thing I have to say, partly because Kyler is reminding me and telling me in the chat I need to, and I do try not to brag about myself too much, but I do have a new book that is launched. Actually, today is the first day of the pre-sale. Oh, thank you.
Can I get first copy of the signed book?
Yes, I'm going to autograph one personally for you, please, for sure. And people that attend Stratosphere 2 will get a physical copy of the book. But if you'd like an electronic soft copy in the meantime, you can order it now. It's actually only $2.99 for the first few days. Then the price goes up when the book actually is released on August 25th. So today is the first day you can find it on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and just search The Final Countdown, that's the name of the book, or you can search my name. You'll find it on Amazon. You can pre-order it now, and it'll be released on August 25th. You can also go to thefinalcountdown.com. And for those that are wondering, yes, I did name that book after the song, The Final Countdown.
And you can't help but hear it right now.
Exactly. Just imagine. I don't have the copyright right to play it on this podcast. Otherwise I totally would.
You don't need it. It's there. It's in my head now.
Yeah. We all know it. We've all heard it a million times. Right. But hopefully everyone will be able to join and see you and I at Stratosphere in Denver here in a couple months, really, in just 2 months in October. But I want to thank you for joining here. AV, any closing thoughts, any closing words you leave with us as we think about tech trends for the rest of this year and next year?
It depends. Sorry, but
that's a good universal.
Yeah, it is a universal thought, and there's a lot of wisdom in it. Like, we make fun of it as being the consultant answer, but there's no one answer to all of this. It really depends on your business practices, your vision, and what outcomes you're looking for. So leave you with that, and always fun, Eric. Thank you for
absolutely.
having me.
A lot of fun. And that's why, to your point, that's why you need to hire a company like Avero or Third Stage to help you make some of those it depends sorts of decisions and define the strategy and execute the strategy and plan that makes the most sense for you. So we're here to help. Both of us, both AV and myself, are here to help. If you'd like to reach out and learn more about our companies or our teams, you know where to find us. You can find us here on LinkedIn. And how do we learn about Avero Advisors website, all that good stuff? How do we learn about you?
AveroAdvisors.com is our website. We are on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we try to emulate Eric on our channels. But yeah, online everywhere, and just follow us, and ask me questions. So
absolutely.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, we can connect with you on LinkedIn. You're pretty active there too, and you're a great voice on LinkedIn. So be sure to connect with AV or follow him there. And we dropped his name and the link in the chat as well, so you've got that. Well, good. Well, thanks for being here today, AV. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the audience questions and great interaction here today from the audience. I hope you found this information helpful. Feel free to share this link to any of your colleagues that might have missed the discussion. And as I mentioned before, this live recording will get edited and polished and integrated with more content, and it'll become part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast episode that gets released a week from tomorrow. So be sure to check that out. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the different platforms that you can watch and listen to the podcast, or you can just look for it on whatever podcast platform you like to listen. So thank you again for joining us here today, AV. Thank you to the audience. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place for our next live recording of the podcast. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
sir.